From interviews to jail calls, Ditto Transcripts delivers fast, confidential, and court ready transcription for law enforcement agencies. Ditto is CJIS compliant and is already working with agencies all over the U.S., including the Washington State Patrol and the National Park Service Investigations Unit. Get started now at dittotranscripts.com. That's dittotranscripts.com. To hear details about all the applications of Ditto Transcripts and exactly why this is a key solution for your organization's workload issues, check out episode 232. We often talk about service and identity beyond the badge. Valor Technical Cleaning is a veteran-owned, nationwide biohazard remediation company hiring active and retired officers for business development roles. With Valor, you can build relationships with local agencies and continue to foster care for the community following tragedy. Continue serving, just in a new way. Visit valortechnicalcleaning.com and click Careers. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, everyone, welcome back. Today I'm joined by a fellow cop all the way from the East Coast. I got Dylan Ignacio. He's an active cop. He's also a new wellness coordinator, but we'll get into some of the newness of that, and that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about. It's like wellness for individuals, for officers and agencies. But he also runs Lift to Live. Lift to Live is his platform. I'll let him talk more about that. But without further, Dylan, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Eric. We haven't known each other that long, but you've already invited me to a handful of different things, and it's been a blessing to be a part of those things. I really appreciate what you and Blue Grit are doing, especially from a command position.
Yeah, no,
So
thanks, man.
excited to be here.
Yeah, it's been really good to get to connect with you a few times. I mean, I think in totality, between like calls like this, I think we've spent a couple hours chatting on all these things that we're so passionate about, some of our personal insights, organizational learnings, and things like that. Shout out to Johnny Reddick for connecting us. I think that I feel very fortunate to be in this network of law enforcement, policing professionals, first responders that care so much about these things that intersect, like wellness, leadership, police culture. Like, how do we do the best we can with what we have? And that's kind of the name of the game.
Yeah, it's pretty dope. Before going into my background, it's just that the people are so genuine that are actually interested in the space. And
Mm-hmm.
so the vetting is pretty easy. You go to any of these wellness events or anything like that, and most of the people, if not all, are all fully invested in that mission. And so you really don't have to do a whole lot of can I trust this person? Because as law enforcement officers, we're skeptical of anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I've had a really great experience with all the networking that I've done in these circles. Everybody's been nothing but helpful and genuine, trying to serve a similar purpose.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, that skepticism comes from survival instinct, right? The necessity to be kind of scrutinizing on the street and in life. It has been really cool to kind of learn more about you, but could you introduce yourself a little bit and a little bit of your background, what brought you into policing and your story?
Yeah. So, yeah, my name is Dylan Ignacio, born and raised in the DMV area over here on the East Coast. For you guys don't know DMV, which is DC, Maryland, Virginia. Like I'm right in that trifecta. Just for all professional purposes, and you already know this, just being in these chambers. I'm not going to mention my agency by any
Mhm.
means, but
Yeah.
it's not hard to find that out if you guys look me up. It's really not that hard to find at all. But because I do run Lift to Live, I want to make sure there's no conflict of interest. But I'll kind of go into it. So I don't have a very I guess traditional way of getting into law enforcement. I grew up definitely a knucklehead. I was the skater punk. When I got hired, like I was Facebook friends with most of our top offenders. Now, with that being said, I did grow up in a law enforcement household. My father, and technically my stepfather, but call him my father,
Hmm.
he, born and raised in the Dominican Republic, came to the US at 15, passed up on a D1 scholarship for baseball because he couldn't take his siblings with him or his little sister. And then he started working at Toys R Us. A recruiter came up to him from our agency and said, "We need Spanish speakers." He
Oh,
goes, "What do you guys do?" Because like police back where I'm from, like I grew up kind of in like he grew up like a chicken coop, you know. So he became a police officer and ended up getting into the gang stuff, and he's well known for his career. The
oh
reason I
wow.
bring that into the conversation is because I didn't grow up in like a thin blue line family. Like I know some people and friends of mine who have family that were in law enforcement. They grew up in a very law enforcement focused household. I
Sure.
did not. My father was passionate about the adventures that he had on the job. However, he was primarily focused on family and he didn't carry like I guess the police officer, whatever. I don't want to call it bravado because it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I just didn't grow up with it. I just
Yeah.
knew he was a police officer. That was his job and X. And I always had respect for him and everything that he did. I was just a knucklehead. My mother is from West Virginia, a very small town. From there to Northern Virginia, and then, um, pretty much raised me until she met my stepdad. And they got together when I was about 6. And all leading up to, I'll fast forward. I was getting ready to turn 21.
Hmm.
I was actually in a car crew. I had a little slammed out Honda Civic. Not proud of it now looking
Badass.
back. I mean, I'm 33 years old now. Like that was
So
such a
cool. What are
ears pierced, the
some of
chin
the
strap.
sweet I want to know some of the sweet mods you made to your Honda Civic.
Bro, I had the AutoZone special. I had no money. You know what I mean? Like there was
Hey man.
nothing fancy about my car other than it being slammed out and not being able to go over curbs well. But I'm working for this government contractor basically as a receptionist. I'm blessed that the owner like took me under his wing, so he had me doing a lot of projects and stuff like that. I think in hopes of me becoming like an actual like uh you know building up as maybe into a leadership space with his company, but I just
Hmm.
had no interest in it.
Yeah.
But long story short, the reason I got into law enforcement was because I was getting ready to turn 21, and my mom was like, "Look, you gotta get the hell out of my house. Like, you're about to be 21. Like, you're not you know what I mean? Like, you got to figure it out."
Yeah.
Now, I brought up both my mom and my dad's cultures because they're a lot different. So
Yeah.
my
A
mom
little
grew up in
bit
West
from
Virginia. She
from
was
what I know about
yes,
West Virginia, which is a bit from a buddy of mine.
yeah. So she was out of the house at 16. I mean,
Mhm.
that was her experience, right? Through her own trials and tribulations, she was pretty much out of the house at 16 and on her own. Now, my father being Dominican, he's like, you can stay here until your kids have kids. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, so he was definitely like, well, I don't know if we need to rush him out, that kind of thing. But, she won, right? So he goes, look, man, you should look into getting into law enforcement. Now, I do kind of undersell myself. Like, yes, I had a lot of friends that were doing a lot of rough things. I luckily stayed away from a lot because I was respectful of my father and fearful of my mother and respectful of my mother, but my mother had a heavy hand.
Yeah.
So I was always like around the BS, but I was never really doing enough to like catch a record or anything like that. But I definitely never thought I'd be a cop. That just wasn't in my I guess in my purview. So
Mhm.
anyways, he goes, you should try to be a cop. I laughed at him. He laughed at me. Next thing I know, I'm in the interview process. And I will tell you this, something about me, it's like a personality trait, is that if I go into anything, I go all in. So once I told myself, you know what, I'm going to be a police officer, I literally cut my little chin strap off, took my earrings out, got the buzz cut,
Mhm.
and got the 511 backpack before ever getting hired. You know what I mean? Like I was
Dude.
like, all right, we're doing it. And it's turned out to be, I've been in law enforcement for coming up, it'll be 12 years next month. It has been the best experience of my life and continues to be.
Dude.
With all the ups and downs, the roller coaster of it, to me, it was a blessing. I went to a regional academy. There was an agency in my academy that was making close to 10K more than I was a year because of salary differentials. And I didn't even care. Like, I was like, this is the most money I've ever made. People are,
Mhm.
one day in complaining about the income, which I understand from their perspective, right? But like for me, I was like, this is awesome. Like, you're telling me I'm getting a chance. And let me tell you about my experience getting in case anybody's listening that, understands how stressful the hiring process is.
Yeah,
I went into
there are
it.
quite a few people that listen in and they're dipping their toe. One dude's
Yeah.
like trying to consider if he's going to do a career change, but that for sure there is a younger listenership that's new or testing. So yeah, please do.
So, as somebody who, had the background that I had and never thought that I'd get into law enforcement, I wasn't expecting to get hired. I kind of had that like, well, I'm going to try, but like, there's definitely more qualified candidates then. And mind you, this was over a decade ago, so the doors were full. Agencies around everywhere are having a hard time recruiting, and which is really sad because I know that the job has been painted in a certain light, but at least for me, and I'm going to be very just personal experience here, like
Yeah.
it has been such a blessing for me. It has not been all rainbows and butterflies. This has been extremely difficult, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But it has been such a blessing for me that, it's kind of sad to see that happen. But it was like 80 people in line for one test, right? I was in shirt and tie. I'm waiting out there, you know what I mean? And luckily I passed a few steps and clearly got the job. But it didn't happen in the way that, you know, it wasn't a smooth process. So basically, during the time my department was going through a transition, so there was a recruiter in there that like they weren't a recruiter, it was just a position that needed to be temporarily filled. So I got told numerous times that I didn't make it to the next step as the steps were progressing. And
Okay.
I just expected that. So I was like, all right. And I'd also put in for the sheriff's office because notoriously the jail's a little bit easier to get into. Like if you're looking to get into law enforcement, jails are a little bit more lax. Like not saying that that does not downplay the importance of their position, but
No, for sure.
what I'm
The standards are generally
yeah,
wider.
you're in house. You're not dealing with the public as much. You're dealing with inmates, so they can kind of filter you and get you better. And some of the best officers I knew started as deputies and then
Yeah.
ended up applying for the police department. So that was my route. I was like, I'm probably going to end up at the sheriff's office. So I was applying for both. So every time I got that letter that was like, hey, you're not going to the next step, I was like, all right, cool. Kind of expected that. But then I'd get a phone call and then it'd be like, hey, you ready for your next thing? And I'm like, well, I just got
Are you saying
so it
the
was a bunch of
recruiter didn't
back
know
and
what they're
forth.
doing, or there's some sort of
Well,
hiccup in the process?
to the recruiter's point, like that wasn't like, when you go into recruiting, you end up getting training on how to recruit and the processes and the policies. It's a complex process to get people in, right? So I think what was happening is that like that person was just trying to fill a slot until they got a new recruiter.
Yeah.
And because of that, there's probably complications. And like I said, back then there were a lot of applicants. So the confusion is up there. So I get to the final, which for us is a panel, right? You get up there and it's all the brass. It's
Mhm.
the head honchos in that meeting. Everybody aside from the chief, except from my experience. And I basically got drilled on everything, and I owned up to everything. I mean,
Yeah.
especially like when it came to the polygraph portion, my dad was like, "I would rather you get disqualified because you're not eligible than get disqualified because you're a liar." Like, just go
1,000%.
in there and tell him everything. And I was telling him everything. I was like, I think I remember when I was 6, I stole a piece of gum I was going all in, right?
Yep, you should.
So passed it. And if I could pass a polygraph, anybody can pass it. What I mean by that is like, if you're worried about your past, like if you're extremely truthful, you will move forward. That's
Mhm.
just my 2 cents. However, I get to this panel interview. They're basically drilling me about everything that I'd experienced. Like, why would we hire you if you've done X, Y, Z and this, Y, Z, and right? And I'm like, I'm just looking for a chance here, right? Like, I won't do it again. I've already made that promise to myself. Like, I'd already made some lifestyle changes prior to some of the stuff I had done because when I moved back in with my parents, I got a little brother and little sister, and I just wasn't doing the same debauchery that I was when I was away at college. So, anyways, they end up denying me, and I'm like, shoot, So I call my pops up. I'm like, hey, they didn't take me. He goes, it's all good. Sheriff's office will get you. You can get back over there in a couple of years. I'm like, yeah, cool. I'm already prepped for that. Well, I ended up getting a phone call from the chief's secretary like a day later, and they're like, hey, the chief wants to talk to you directly because they can override the decision
Oh,
if
dang.
and I talked to the chief. Now, mind you, I did go to school with the chief at the time's daughter, so
Mhm.
like he kind of knew me. But he had a 2-hour long conversation with me. And mind you, I'm like back then when I was getting hired. I mean, I'm like 5'10", like average height. I was like 100 and probably like 50 pounds, 60 pounds soaking wet. I was a little guy. This
Mhm.
guy used to be a lineman in football, right? Like one of our former chiefs. No longer works there, but big guy, right? And so I remember us talking for about 2 hours, and he walks me out, still didn't give me an answer yet. And we get in the elevator. And as we get in the elevator, as he's walking me down, he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he's a massive dude, like 6'3",
Mm-hmm.
like a solid 250, 300 pounds,
Probably
right?
took up most of the elevator.
Yeah, seriously. And he goes, "All right, I'm going to give you this chance. But if you mess this up, I will make sure you never get a job in law enforcement again." And I was like, yes,
Yeah.
sir. Right? Like, hey,
Yeah.
anything I got to do.
Thank you, sir.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I got into it. And that's pretty much my journey getting into law enforcement. And it has been an absolute roller coaster ever since.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you sharing that. And there's a couple things I want to kind of highlight and bring back because the listenership spans from people that are interested, they're testing all the way through every stage of the career, every rank in the career, and retirees, right? And people outside of the career that are just curious and intrigued. So, a couple things though, I mean, really highlight why I was excited to bring you on, and I've been excited to get to know you better. Is that mindset, and a lot of that is that positivity. And you'll share a little bit about your personal struggle and why you think and care and believe what you do about wellness and the necessity to invest in your health and support others because of that. But even all that said, you're like, man, it's been an awesome ride, right? You're reflecting so positively, um, and I think that just speaks so much to your character. But also, you're highlighting early on how the resilience in that almost that stoic, like, okay, cool, like I expect to not move forward, but I'm going to put everything I can toward it, and I'll be damned if I don't get a chance someday, right? And I think that that is so necessary for this career. It's really what separates a lot of good candidates from not good candidates, because I was in hiring and I sat on tons of boards even before that experience, on both sides of the table. But there's a lot of people that are like, yeah, I'm gonna do what I can, and I'm gonna see if that's a good fit and all that. But then they get told no, kind of their first or second time. They're like, well, I guess it wasn't for me. And I'm like, then you're absolutely right, it wasn't, right? But so much of you is an example that I really want the younger men and women to hear, which is that you went in super humble, but also you had that, something you said really resonates with me, which when you decide you're going to do something, like you're full bore, like full tilt, right? And I know that about you from a lot of aspects of your story, but I was very much the same. Like I didn't grow up thinking that this was going to be my path, but once I decided like I wanted to go for police and fire, like I bought books on the thing before like you could really find things like that, not as prevalently as you can now, fortunately for today's age. So all to say, man, like your gratitude and positivity, I think that that's a critical thing that I really want people to think about and focus in on. Because yeah, if you've been policing for a number of years, it's not a fun ride all the time. But for you to think back and be extremely grateful and positive about it, I mean, that's what I really want to share and encourage listeners to do for themselves and the people that they're rubbing shoulders with at the station.
So I think this bleeds beautifully into my career progression. So I can give a little background on that.
Hmm.
Um, my optimism. Well, first of all, my outlook on the career and getting into it and stuff like that. I gotta give kudos to my father because he was just like, "Hey, listen," and I've learned this to be true throughout my career too. Most of the best officers we had to apply numerous times. And from his case, because he did a lot of work in as a detective, that was like the highlight of his career
Mm.
into his retirement. Is he said some of the best detectives I know did not make it the first, second, even third time into being getting hired into the department. Right.
Are you looking for help with your rest and recovery, wanting to optimize your sleep and prime performance? Well, New Calm is built on neuroscience, and it's been used by special operators, SportTAC, pro sports teams, and many, many more for years. To learn more and access the best deals of the year, go to newcalm.co/grit. That's Newcalm, NUCALM.co/grit.
So that was like kind of like I was like, all right, well, you're telling me this, I believe you. Like we'll just keep pushing forward. But my optimism actually was created out of a survival tactic. So again, I get into this career, have no idea what to expect. I definitely grew up like the kind of emo, like skater, then gangster, then I just trying to find my way, right? Identity
Can I
crisis.
interrupt though? I wanted to ask you earlier, for your skater phase, what was the music you're listening to? Like, what were you into at the time?
It's so generic, but I was like a huge Limp Bizkit fan. I was a
I
huge
love it.
Linkin Park fan. Like, I remember, like, just being real little, like, listening to Limp Bizkit's back when you had, like, actual, like, CD players, and
Mhm.
I was listening to one of Limp Bizkit's their Hybrid Theory, and one of their songs is like, "Shut up when I'm talking to you," and I'm, like, in the kitchen, like, "Shut up when I'm talking to you." My mom, like, slaps me. She's like, "What are you doing?" Right?
Yeah.
You know? But, yeah,
Talk
so I
about
was definitely
Lincoln Park hybrid theory?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
like, way back, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I knew, like, all of the words to all of their songs. I think a
Mhm.
lot of people, like, that I especially that I work with that attract to this job, like, kind of have, like, a deep, resemblance to that kind of music, but it's just funny. So I grew up with that kind of music, more into the rock and somewhat into the rap, but, yeah, mainly, like, any genres that flowed across, like, and of course, like, going in like, we had a little bit of Nickelback in there, you know what I'm saying? I'm not afraid to talk
Mm.
about it,
Yeah.
like let the ego hit the floor real quick, a little limping back, a lot of Slipknot, a lot of Disturbed, like kind of
Yeah,
that.
some harder
Um,
stuff, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's kind of, and I still listen to that stuff this day. I just love it.
Yeah.
But so I get into law enforcement. I get blessed enough to make it through FTO and, get through the academy, FTO. And then I'm out on the street by myself. And because the main goal originally, like I stated in the beginning, was to get me out, I was able to get an opportunity in one of our low income housing areas where it's free rent, but you're living in kind of a, shithole. And I lived there for 6 years, uh, dealing with stuff on and off duty, things like that. But I did enjoy it because I just didn't know any better, right? But I finally had my own place. I'm there, I'm doing that. And what I was not doing, because I just didn't even think to do it, was I wasn't necessarily taking care of myself. I was
Mm.
handling the job, right? Like, I was on patrol, I was going to all these calls, and I'm not treating this as a trauma dump, but I just had a numerous amount of calls of things that I had never experienced before in my life, and it humbled me, right? I went from like this woe is me, like all the problems are my problems, to like, whoa, these are real people, real problems. Like, let me take a
Mhm.
back seat. Like, in the grand scheme of things, I didn't grow up like as rough as I thought I did comparatively to who I'm dealing with, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So basically, my on midnights, I mean, I got to a point where, and I'm making this brief, but I'd get to a point where I'd get off work at like 5 a.m. and then I'd bang an energy drink and play video games until, 12 or whatever, because my favorite game's out or whatever.
It's
Or maybe I would,
the life of a
yeah, it
single
was awesome.
man, yeah.
It was pretty awesome. And then, like, when it came to drinking and stuff like that, like, all the boys like to drink. So we'd be going out every weekend. We could get out, we'd go out and drink and stuff like that. And, I've always been in the gym. I've always been physically active. But the problem is that as I looked around my apartment over a year, so we'll say 2014, I got hired. So, 4 years into it, right? I'm not managing the stress very well. Like, I've kind of developed these bad habits. And what I mean by that is you start looking at my apartment, the laundry's not getting done, right? I'm like prioritizing the quick dopamine, right? I'm prioritizing the nights out. I'm prioritizing the video games. I'm prioritizing, anything else that, like, I guess makes me feel better than the stress of the job. And before I know it, the laundry's piled up, the dishes aren't done, the trash is piling up, the floor's not vacuumed, right? And like kind of like everything's starting to fall apart. And I'm sure you've heard this before, but and this is all me, learning this years later, but the way that your place looks, like if you were to look at my apartment now, it's pretty spotless. And the way that you know, the kind of the chaos I had, the tornado I had going in my apartment was conflicting, was basically building up into what was going on in my mind.
Mhm.
So, they really they were identical to each other. And in 2018, I started dealing with suicidal ideologies, and they weren't, from talking to a lot of people over the years that have dealt with those, everybody deals with them a little bit differently. For me, it wasn't one call for service that like just was like, "Oh, this was so bad that like it
Mhm.
sent me here," right? It was just the totality of everything. It was not prioritizing my sleep, not prioritizing my nutrition, not prioritizing my health, not going to get my yearly checkups at the doctor because I ended up having some health issues that I didn't know about. And then, of course, like just not having any kind of discipline outside of the job. And at no point during that time did my career performance was affected. And I kind of make that a point because from everybody else that I was working with, like I had good buddies on the job. We were out there running a gun and we are getting after it. We were having a lot of fun. However, I was kind of falling apart internally and didn't know it until I started dealing with these really intrusive thoughts. That my thought process on it when I started dealing with these thoughts was, I don't want to do this. However, I feel like that if I don't change something, I'm going to lose this battle because the thoughts were so intrusive, right? Any moment of silence I had, it's like, why don't you just, you know what I mean? And then you start to visualize it and you're like, and I'm like, well, I don't want to do this. Like I have 4 sisters and 3 brothers. I have a loving family. Like I love my people, like at work, like, like I don't want to do this, but how do I overcome this? And I tried to thug it out for like a year. Like I took a year and I was like, I don't want anybody to know about this because I got the same hero complex we all do. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't want anybody to know about this. And so I'm going to try to solve it on my own. And that didn't work. Right. And so luckily I'd reached out to a sergeant who had expressed the importance of being open, that he had dealt with these thoughts prior. And I remember reaching out to him. He's like, hey, these are the services we offer, and I was ready to do anything. I was like, hey, and I say this on podcasts before, like I was ready to jump in front of a fire and sing Kumbaya and hold hands with strangers if that's what was going to get me to a better headspace. So I was all game for everything. Um, had my first therapist appointment. She was late and then talked about herself the entire time.
Yeah.
Went to a different therapist. He fell asleep during one of our sessions, and I was like, it ended up he had like some brain trauma or something. But like, I was like, shoot, like this, like
This is not
like
a good
brother, like
start.
help me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I'm like,
Yeah.
dang, like somebody help me, right? So what I started to do, and I thought it was kind of ironic, is I've always had like a small passion for like business and entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
And so I started to realize that a lot of these books I was reading, like that would help you better in business, were actually just good lifestyle habits to incorporate in your life totally, like all together. And what I mean by that was eating healthy, making your bed every morning, right? Like making sure your apartment's clean and squared away, like getting your exercise in or doing meditative practices and stuff like that. And then I ended up going to a psychologist, and that really helped me because I'm definitely more accustomed to like the punch in the throat approach to wellness. And he was like, hey, brother, this is what's going on with your mind. This is what's going on. And if you don't do these things, you're going to continue to suffer. So it's up to you.
Mm.
And so I was taking a lot of the practices that he put into play. And he was like, look, I highly suggest you start meditating. I highly start you start putting together a gratitude journal, and really start to maybe piece back like your childhood and stuff like that and see if there's any connections there
Mhm.
between what you're feeling now and maybe childhood stuff. So I ended up finding out that a lot of things I experienced as a child actually did like kind of translate into the trauma exposure on the job,
Yeah.
and things started to get better. Another thing I did was I finally went to the doctor, started getting blood work, found out that I had really low testosterone.
Mhm.
I had hypothyroidism, which is thyroid disorder, which I didn't know I had. All those things because they deal with your, um, uh, they deal with all your levels, right? Your hormones.
Mhm.
Like I found out that damn, like that was a big piece of my depression was just
Yeah.
medically related.
Yeah, can I
So I was
ask you,
doing all these
because
things.
you were super into fitness, because I had similar really terrible blood work, but I was really into fitness at the time, but it was, like, too much stress. I know you talked about that on your show a couple times, like, cortisol through the roof, your
Yep.
adrenaline responses, but then, like, the two-a-days kinda, like, heavy lifting, rigid diet, you're trying to get strength and physique at the same time. Did you have an aspect of that that was contributing to that?
I'm sure I was overtraining. I really didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I had a
Mhm.
six pack and I was like, yeah, but I was also like super thin. So, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I made a joke about this on our last podcast actually that we have that like, it was like, I'm gonna get the six pack and get the girl of my dreams. And that doesn't
Mhm.
happen. Then I'm gonna buy
Yeah.
this car. And, so a lot of things were during that time period where I was trying to get myself together. I was still kind of chasing those highs and riding
Mhm.
those lows.
Yeah.
And like what I mean is like I was living rent free, right? But because I wasn't taking care of myself at that time, my finances were tanking where I really didn't have a reason to, right? And it was a lack of education. Like I didn't really know like what any of that meant or like what I needed to put away or, XYZ, right? But now you have financial stress, then you have work stress, then you have lifestyle stress, and like your cortisol levels are just never being alleviated. And working out is a form of stress, although
Yes. Mhm.
it's self-induced, right? But and it does help, reset those cycles. However, like if you're not sleeping properly, which in
Yep.
our job, like, and especially being young, I was 21 when I got in, was sleep. You know what I mean? I'm good.
Mhm.
I could get like 2, 3 hours, 3, 4 hours, and I'm cooking. And that did work for a few years. And then you start getting older, and it's like you need that sleep. So as I started to work on all these things, like progressively, my life started to get better. However, my I started to have conflicts with the job. So I was like, do I really want to do this anymore? Right? Like, do I really want to be in this profession? Like 4 years into it, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And so I talked to my dad about it, and he was like, hey, man, why don't you try to put in for a specialized unit? You have enough time on. Like, why don't you try to put in for something? And he had suggested, he's like, you're really good with the community. You're really good with this. Like, why don't you put in for COPS, which was our community outreach program that we had, right? I was like, sure. And yeah, I didn't get it on the first try. It actually took me 3 tries to get in, but I was persistent just because of what I talked about in the beginning of the podcast. Because my dad was like, hey, look, it took me 3 times to be a detective. So, and he's glorified for, a lot of things that he's done. He's a very humble man who never talk about himself, but he's done very well in his career. So I was like, all right, well, I'll just keep trying because I was just like chasing that thing, right? So I get into the community outreach stuff and I'm pretty good at it, right? Like I'm out there building relationships with the community. I grew up in the area that I serve.
Mhm.
So I knew most of the players in the game. And one of the cool things is like my dad suggested, most community outreach are known for like, the sticker hander outers and the events and stuff like that, which is a piece of it. But what my dad was saying was like cops officers are the best at helping solve crime because they can get information from the community that they will not give to the detectives, to anybody else or anybody they don't know.
Yeah, that's like the
So,
legit community policing, not just the
yes.
social media community policing, right?
So that's where I got excited. So when a
Mhm.
detective would hit me up when like a, shooting happened in my area or something like that, you felt empowered, right? Like you're like, yes, like they trust me to go talk to this person because they won't talk to them. And then I'd be able to create that relationship. And I rode that unit out for, I don't know, six plus years. Now talking about the twists and turns of the job, out of the time that I was in the community outreach unit due to staffing, 3.5 years of that was actually back in patrol on a temporary rotation. So I
Yeah.
didn't spend the full time in that unit. I actually got pushed back to the street, which, you know, I was not like I was not happy about, right? Like I did not want to go back to patrol. I got told to go back to patrol. I really did get screwed around. Like they were like, hey, you're going to be on this schedule or it's going to be a 90-day rotation. Okay, cool. Now the 90-day rotation is here, but staffing hasn't approved. So we got to keep you. Where do you want to be? I was like, hey, keep me in my shift. They were like, yeah, no problem. Next day I get a transfer and it's to a completely opposite shift on a different time frame. But again, because I'd learned those practices from dealing with my suicidal thoughts, I was like, I got to stay optimistic about this. I made a promise to myself back then. I said, I'm not going to let this job dictate like basically, I didn't want to get back to that thought process. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm never going to let the job get me back there. So I just ran with it. And I ended up, I'm now best friends with some of those guys that like I ran with on patrol then. Some of them are like in very high positions, like violent crime detectives, all that kind of stuff. Like they were all go getters. So, and because did stay in good shape and I was, I'd like to think of myself as a decent cop, like they really trusted me. They were like, hey, yo, we're about to go do this, Ignacio, like come through. Right. And that felt empowering too. Cause I'm like, oh, you want me to be there in case the guy runs? You want me to be there in case,
Mhm.
XYZ? And you're like,
Oh, yeah.
so, and then they were like, you should be an FTO because we're all FTOs. And, in their opinion, the training quality was going down because it's just, we were some of the few officers that had a lot of time on. And now because of heavy turnover, now you have guys who have like only a year or two on that are training. So they're like, you need to become an FTO. And I was like, if you guys say so. So then I got to be an FTO. And at first, again, it wasn't something I wanted to do, but it ended up being a blessing. And then one avenue, and then I am kind of like skimming through the career is at one point I decided, hey, and I do think in the beginning, I'm not afraid to admit this, but it was kind of an ego thing. But I was like, okay, I've been down bad in my mental health, and I've been in the community outreach space for a long time. I want to show these guys that I can be an operator. So I put in for our TSU, which is basically at the bots and stuff. So it's more the tech side.
Hmm.
I got that and I was like, that's not good enough. I want to be an operator. So then I put in for our special operations team and we had a big turnout. It was like 26 plus people put in for it and they only chose 4. I was one of 4 and I got on the team. Now I get about we have a part-time team. So you're still doing all the patrol stuff, but you're also expected to do all the special operations stuff. I get 6 months in, I'm in this really messed up relationship, and like I'm not focusing on the tasks at hand, right? Like I'm running routes and then I'm coming back, checking my phone, we're arguing, whatever. And so 6 months in, I made a really hard decision and I cut everything. Like I stepped off the team, I ended the relationship, and I was just going to start clean and all that. And honestly, the people, they're really supportive, but the command in SOT was like, dude, like we haven't asked you to leave. Like, maybe to your standard you're not performing, but like you're doing all right. Like, why would you leave? It's not easy to get this position. And I explained it. I said, I'm not in the right headspace to perform at the level I believe I need to be for you guys, and I don't ever want to be a liability. So I actually stepped off the team, which a lot of them had a lot of respect for. I stepped off the team, and around the same time, my best friend of mine, who I'd met through the department, his name's Phil Morse, he was going through a divorce. And we have a podcast on this, so I'm allowed to talk about it. All the litigation's been done. This was back in 2020 into 21. And he was like really like it made him suicidal. He got, with her for 5 years. They get married. She has an affair like a few months into the marriage, and he's crippled, right? And so I'm like, wow, maybe what I went through was a blessing because now I can help him through this. So we looked at each other and we're like, dude, we have two options. We either hit the bottle hard together because we're both down bad over women, or we hit the gym really hard. So we might have done a little bit of both, but mainly the gym. And, so we get into the gym and we're going to this really small gym out by his house. And so we're like the biggest guys in that gym, right? By now I'm already like on TRT. So like, like I'm definitely bigger than I was before. And the thyroid condition with the medicine also made me beef up a few 10, 15 pounds. And so we're feeling solid. We're on programs, we're getting after it. And there's this small group of local college students that are younger than us that are also going to this gym. And they're like, over time, we start mentoring them to the point where like one of them was going through an actual mental health crisis. We had to call police to get him assistance that day. Wow. And actually thanked us for it later. So they look at us and they go, yo, you guys have helped us out so much. You guys should start something. Like, you guys ever thought about doing a podcast or anything like that? And I was like, yeah. Like, ironically, I had a podcast for a little bit called the One Less Podcast. It was a suicide prevention effort. It was something that I started while I was going through my suicidal thoughts struggle. Yeah. So it was kind of half-assed, right? Like, it was more of like not focusing on my own problem, but trying to feed into just another direction, right? Sure. Yeah. And so it kind of like faltered, but I was like, I know how to set up a podcast. Like, I've done it before. And I look at Phil, I'm like, yo, you want to do a podcast? He's like, dude, I'm down for whatever. So we were going to call it the Gym Bros Podcast. Pretty whack, looking back at it. And then I had a shower thought. Bros bro. And so I had my entrepreneur brain kicked in. Like I said earlier, I was like really into business. So I was like, I love the branding aspect of things. I was like, dude, my best thoughts come in the shower. No, but I'm taking a shower and I'm like, dude, what can we name this? Like, it's got to be badass. Like, what can we name it? And I came up with Lift to Live.
All right, that was part 1 of this 2-part interview. Make sure to tune in next time to hear the rest of the tips and insight from our conversation. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.